Welcome to Rooted to Thrive, conversations to elevate our humanity. I'm your host, Rochelle Professor P for short. This is your podcast sanctuary for cultivating mindsets and skills to elevate our shared humanity. We're taking a deep dive into practical strategies to evolve as anti-racist, culturally competent, and inclusive individuals and leaders. In each episode, we're bringing you real-world examples and actionable takeaways. We're going to talk about personal growth, fostering connection, and creating positive change that dismantles systemic barriers and creates environments where all of us are valued, empowered, and activate our collective power. This is Rooted to Thrive. Hi there, and welcome back to everyone joining us on Rooted to Thrive, conversations that elevate our humanity podcast. I am your host, Rochelle Peterson-Ansari, aka Professor P. Today, we have none other than Chuanika Sanders-Thomas. Now, did I pronounce your last name correctly? Is it Sanders?
Sanders-Thomas.
It's Sanders. Okay. My New York was coming out.
That's okay.
And so we have Chuanika Sanders-Thomas, who is an executive and leadership coach. She's the CEO of Imagine and Inspire Leadership, a firm focused on coaching and leadership development. Now, Chuanika has worked in public education for more than 25 years. She's been a teacher, principal, and an executive leadership coach. She has a deep love of learning and has spent the last several years learning about coaching and its impact on our quality of life. She's a professional certified coach with the International Coaching Federation and recently received a certificate in team coaching. Now to the good part. I met Chuanika some years ago when I worked at LaSalle as a director of placements and partnerships, right? And she was at an elementary school that was in LaSalle's network. And that's when we first met. And I will tell you, even back then, I knew that she was a light, yes, not only in her building, but just for her people, for young people. And when I say her people, I mean everybody who was in her building. And that really, I responded to that. We reconnect several years later, right? She's been out of the school and coaching other principals. And I have since moved on from LaSalle, and then we run into each other, and there was that light again, and that spark between us. And so I have the honor of calling her a friend today. But today she's going to give you some awesome information that helps you from her area of expertise, but you will see the light that I've been talking about. So I am so excited to have you speak on our topic today. To get started, just tell us how you're doing today.
Oh, I'm great. And thank you so much for the warm welcome. And likewise, it was great to reconnect with you. Such great energy when we get to talk and, talk about all things equity, our children, and education. So I'm really happy to be here with you.
Happy to have you here. That is excellent. So our topic today is Lead with Love, Mastering Self-Coaching to Deepen Human Connection. So can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved in this work?
Sure. You said I've been an educator for over 25 years. Started out as a teacher working in Philadelphia public schools and became an assistant principal. Spent some time in Delaware County and became a principal. So much of my career now has been spent in leadership.
Mm,
And then over the last several years, I've wanted to deepen my practice and just really have a better understanding of adult behavior. And I got into coaching, got a
mm.
position in coaching as a coach. And that position wasn't exactly what I thought it was going to be. But let me tell you, what I found out that it would be really has transformed me in a way that I don't think anything else could have. So, just want to talk a little bit about the power of coaching today and
That's
self coaching in particular.
excellent. Excellent. So, wow, you said that there was nothing that has transformed you more than coaching. Can you share just a little bit about that transformation for us?
Absolutely. I think that as an educator, and most would agree that we have been exposed to instructional coaching for all of your careers, but there is a specific type of coaching, executive coaching, leadership coaching, transformational coaching that not everybody gets to experience. You see it a lot in the business world. CEOs and C suite leaders are privy to this style coaching. And when I became a coach, when I left my school as a principal, what I thought coaching was going to be going into schools and working with people about all of the things,
Mhm.
all of the things around teacher observation and all of the leadership things. But what I found it to be and what I learned about coaching is that it is this a container of confidentiality and trust that you create between you and the person that you're coaching. And the coaching really is a way to slow down time, if you will, or to help people take a pause and to talk about the things that are really impeding their growth, their desired state, or their leadership.
Mm,
And typically, what that turns into is people talking about things that maybe they didn't even realize were limiting beliefs that they were holding on to, or things that were standing in their way. And I did not realize how much I needed coaching when I transitioned from my school leadership position into a coach position. There were things that I had been holding on to a very long time, ways of being, behaviors, mindset shifts that needed to change. And through me being coached and learning how to coach, it just helped me really to see the world a little bit differently and to see leadership through a different lens. So I am a very different leader today than I was 4 years ago when I left
wow.
school.
Wow, that's powerful information. I can't wait to dig into this. Uh, so, before we move on, though, I'm curious about what came to mind for you when you heard the title of this podcast, Rooted to Thrive, Conversations that Elevate Our Humanity. How does that connect to what you do?
I think, just thinking about the word thrive, so many of us are walking through life existing. And we have not even begun to tap the surface of what it means to thrive. And when I connect that back to roots and a foundation being built, there has to be some foundation there, some set of core values or principles that are guiding you along this journey so that you can really go through life and thrive. And, conversations that elevate humanity, the word humanity, I think, is a word that we throw around a lot, but I wonder for people, how do you embody elevating humanity? How do you interact with people in a way that lifts their human spirit? that makes them feel welcome, that makes them feel included, and that makes them feel involved, because our human experience is what leads us to helps us get to our purpose. So I'm just excited today to talk about foundations and roots and, elevating humanity, because I want everyone to thrive, you know?
Yes. Yes. And what I hear embedded in that, right? You said people, well, one, just thriving, right? How many people are just existing, as you mentioned, and not thriving? Wow, I can imagine, right? And yeah, that's part of why I started this podcast. But also, you talked about people going back to their foundation. And that suggests to me that people have within them, or at least a core belief of yours, is that people have within them what they need. Would you say that's accurate?
I definitely would. I think that, when we are born, we are given exactly what we need to thrive. But life happens, life starts life, and it becomes a challenge sometimes for us to be in tune and to get in touch with our inner selves or our higher selves that would lead us to the place of being able to thrive.
Hmm. And I would also dare say that we don't teach a lot of that in schools.
Absolutely. We
Yeah. Yeah, unfortunately, we don't teach a lot of that in schools. And I'm not so sure that we shouldn't. Actually, I believe that we should, right? Because even if the goal of schooling is to prepare people to be, right, responsible adults and citizens of a particular country, as we do in the United States, I don't see how we can leave out deepening our human connection in preparing to be responsible adults and citizens. Even just saying the word citizen suggests that we are in community with others.
absolutely.
Yes. So, talk to us a little bit about this mastering self coaching to deepen human connection. I'm sure many of our listeners need to understand what you mean by self coaching. Maybe you could also share what you mean by coaching and then self coaching.
Absolutely. So I was thinking, you said something that just made me back up a little bit, is that the world is so fast paced
Mm,
and we're moving at lightning speed. We're making quick decisions, and we're oftentimes treating interactions with other people as we're downloading information. So when you begin to operate like that, it becomes a habit to not pause, not to create space, not to fully let, if you're working with students, let students kind of figure things out and untangle their own knots. Working with staff, we treat staff the same way. And then sometimes internally, we don't give ourselves the time to process, to slow down, and to figure things out. We'll Google it, looking things up and trying to find the answers. And we do that. When we do that, it diminishes the light within us and the
mm,
ability that we all have to serve as our own guides. So
mm,
I think I said, when I assumed the role of coaching, what I thought it was going to be was similar to what I had known about instructional coaching. And you kind of come with an agenda. You talk with the leaders, a back and forth, or talk with staffs, a back and forth conversation, but you've kind of already decided where this person is and where you would like to get them by the end of a conversation or the end of a session or interaction. But when you talk about leadership coaching and transformational coaching, it really is a conversation that's centered around the person that you are talking with. You don't come with an agenda, but you really show up and you really offer the gift of being present, and you engage a person in a conversation centered around the thing that they feel like they need to spend the most time on to work through. And when you approach a conversation in that way, just being able to listen without having a response going, in your head, I'm ready to say this, but listening in a way that creates a space for a person to fully open up and to fully be transparent with you. But you are, as a coach, you're really acting as a mirror for the person sitting across from you so that they are able to see themselves as they are. They're able to hear themselves and hear their innermost thoughts. And when you do that, you find that people come to their own conclusions. They come to their own awareness and plans without you having to say a whole lot.
Mhm.
And when people arrive at the point where they're creating their own plan and they're driving what happens next, they're pretty vested in that, you know?
Yes.
So applying that same concept of coaching to self coaching. And, it's a blessing that I learned, how to be a coach. Because I think over the years, I've had to apply self coaching in a couple different situations. A situation that comes to mind, I was on a business trip and we had boarded a plane. I was on my way home from Denver. And I don't want to say I have a fear of flying because I don't have a fear of flying. What I dislike about flying is being in that enclosed space and not moving. So the plane was delayed, weather wasn't good. They're de-icing the plane, and I sat on that plane like 10 minutes past. I'm like, okay. 20 minutes past. I'm like, okay. 30 minutes past, like, okay, I think I'm getting ready to have a nervous breakdown. And as I was, saying this, the thought came in my mind like, you are a coach. You have coached people through challenging situations. The same should apply for yourself. And as
Mm.
I sat there, I began to really coach myself. And at this point, it was like a lot of inquiry. Your feel. Pay attention to your heartbeat right now. Pay attention to your
Mhm.
breathing. What's going on? What are you feeling in your body? Where is this coming from? And the more I begin to ask myself questions, the more I realize that I really have an issue with being stuck.
Wow.
Whether it's
Okay.
being on a plane and not being able to move, whether it's being in a position that I feel like I can't make any movement in, the issue I have with is being stuck. I don't like to feel like I'm standing still.
Mhm.
And that was something that I really had never linked together with, this apprehension that I had about flying before that time that I began to really coach myself. And I was using my phone. I was asking myself questions, but I was writing down the responses. And after a while, when I got to, the awareness of what the problem really, really was, it's like, what are you going to do about it? At this point, I'm
Mm.
like 45 minutes in and I'm still sitting there. You can't go anywhere. You are stuck, girlfriend.
Yes.
But what do you do when you're stuck or when you
Mm.
feel stuck? Because
Mhm.
really, our reality is however we perceive it to be stuck.
Mhm.
If I have the perception that I'm sitting here and I'm stuck, that's going to keep me stuck. Or I can perceive it in a different way. I'm delayed for a moment, or I'm taking a time out. And the more I begin to speak to myself, there was a point when I was trying to recite a scripture that
Mm-hmm.
I knew by heart. I couldn't even get it out because my breathing was off. I was just kind of, in a bad state of mind for a moment. But
Mm-hmm.
being there in that situation really helped me to see that you can coach other people, but you can also coach yourself.
All right.
You can also pause. You can also use inquiry to slow down time, to really investigate your own feelings and emotions and figure out a path forward. At that moment, there wasn't anyone that I could, call or to help me to figure out a path forward. I think my husband sent a text like, chill, babe, you be cool.
That didn't quite do it.
So I appreciate it. But,
Mhm.
it was one of those moments where, I really needed to tap into self. And since that time, I have been intentional about really using self coaching,
Mm,
making time to pause, to reflect, to be introspective. And when you do that, it creates awareness.
mm,
Awareness around, usually a lot of times when we start reflecting, we want to put blame on other people or we want to put blame on other things. But when you sit with yourself and you really start to reflect, you start to ask yourself questions about what can I do differently?
mm,
Or how did I show up in a way that may have triggered that response from
mm,
somebody else?
mm,
And when you start having moments of awareness like that, it
mm.
becomes transformational.
Oh, that's wonderful.
You start to really see that sometimes there are things that you need to shift and that you
Mm,
need to change. That would help to elevate your interactions with other people. And I always say that the way we interact with people, before we say anything verbally, our energy communicates with another person's energy.
yes.
So
Yes, it does.
after that initial communication is that nonverbal energy communication is the start of our verbal communication.
Mm,
And sometimes we just don't recognize things because, again, when you move quickly, it prevents you from seeing what's actually there.
yes. Wow. Yeah, that was a lot. And I was having moments thinking about moments when I have self-coached that were really transformational. I would not have called it self-coaching at the time. It was plain old introspection for sure. But I do remember a time, this was quite a few years ago, um, when I had a challenging encounter with a staff member. And I had brought this person on to work on a summer project, and they needed to provide me with a report. And I could hear in the interaction, I heard like the person kind of just deflate in front of me. And I remember thinking something is not right about my communication in this moment because I was a little surprised by that, right? Like, why does the person feel deflated just from what I was seeing? Um, and what the person said to me was, "Oh, I didn't know I had to do a report." In my introspection, I realized that was I, I was I immediately my let me rephrase that. My perfectionist self at the time showed up, and the perfectionist did not want to be wrong. And I began to tell the person the arc of the sun on the day that I told them they needed to write this report. But competing with that was this person in me that cares deeply about people. I don't ever want somebody to leave an interaction with me feeling deflated because of my actions. Yes. And I went on a journey of introspection to find that it was that perfectionist gal showing up, and then committed to doing the work for that not to happen again. Now, she showed up over the years, but I could catch it sooner. So I definitely know the power of self-coaching. It really matters, right? And I had the opportunity to kind of fix that, right? Like course correct, not only with other people, but with that person, because I really deeply cared about that person. And I thought, my goodness, like I would never want them to leave our relationship, right? Like fractured, or I didn't want to leave our relationship fractured. So I went back and humbly, like I said, course corrected. Um, but back to the self-coaching itself, you know, I understand the power of it. You started talking about, some of the things that we can do to self-coach, but I want you to share, I don't want to forget this, that experience you shared with us actually resulted in a book.
It it did.
Yes.
Yes, a workbook around. And what I found with leadership, and you just gave a perfect example, is that leaders often, sometimes your passion can
Mm,
hijack, your impact. I know it wasn't any intention that you had to make this person feel this way, but when you are passionate about something, you see the vision, you get it.
mhm,
You're 3, 4, 5 steps ahead of other people sometimes, and how you communicate that can have an impact. And that's why I think it's important, in this workbook, one of the things I go over is just making time to be reflective.
mm,
How do you build self reflection into your daily practice?
mm,
Do you get up in the morning, after you do whatever your morning routine is? Do you make time to reflect on yesterday, or at the end of your day, or somewhere in between? Do you make time just to slow down and check in with yourself?
mm.
What's coming up for me?
Right,
What
right.
feels important right now?
Yeah,
How do
yeah.
I handle that situation? Is that in alignment with my value system? And when you pause long enough and you sit still, you will find that questions begin to emerge, or interactions that you have with other people come to mind, or fears or apprehensions about conversations that you need to have begin to come up. And it gives you an opportunity for you to, number one, feel your feelings
Mm,
and feel your emotions. What was it about what she did that triggered me to have the response that I'm having now?
right,
So,
right.
what
Yeah.
about this meeting that's coming up is making me feel, apprehensive or fearful? And when you give yourself time to almost breathe, you ask yourself, what am I inhaling and what am I exhaling?
That's a very good point. And leaders, yeah, I've been in education for, 40 years basically. And I know that I've had the experience of, especially in higher education, of in the, adjunct faculty role, feeling like I had to be the expert, right? Even though it may have run counter to who I think I am, right? Like, so I have a certain level of expertise, but I also believe my students do,
Mhm.
right? And they bring something to that space. When I was only leaning into the expert piece and having, preparing in a way that I thought I needed to show up as the expert, it was not a pleasant experience for me to prepare for class even. And when I was able to release it, because I noticed that it's because you're trying to be something that you're not, right? You're trying to show up as all knowing, as if what you bring to the table isn't good enough as it is. Again, that's peppered with that perfectionism, but also what culture was teaching me, right? So as a woman, as a Black person, as a person that was part-time faculty versus a full-time, professor, I was carrying a lot of what the world told me about those identities instead of standing in the truth, right? And actually I was very well regarded as an adjunct faculty member. Some of the full-time faculty members have actually been coached by me by their request, right? So there were things that I knew that were valuable that I had within me, however they were gained, whether formally, informally, from my mama, right, who had a high school education, my daddy who had an eighth grade education, wherever it came from, it was valuable, but I had let the world's interpretation of that stand in the way. I'm sure in my leadership as an administrator, it showed up as well. But I'm really thinking about that leader who has to show up as feels like they have to show up as the expert, especially new leaders, right?
Absolutely. And that, that is so real for folks. And part of the self coaching journey is understanding who you are, understanding what your strengths are, but also understanding what your grow areas are and the things that cause you to feel, that you're not at your best. And, yes, carrying that perfectionism around, yes, yes, and yes, a little bit of the pleaser in me that wants to, get it right for everybody. Those things definitely hijack your leadership. And if you don't recognize those things, it will show up as a blind spot
Mm,
each and every time and set you back a couple of steps. And that's why it really is important for you to sit with yourself, but also to talk with other people and to get feedback,
mm,
about your leadership and about
yeah,
how they perceive your interactions with them. I think that's important. And the other thing I'll just say is that, coaching approaches every single conversation with the belief that all human beings are capable, they are whole, and that they have the ability to figure it out or solve
yes,
their own problems.
yes,
And when we approach life from that perspective, it takes away a little bit of that pressure for us to feel like experts all of the time in every situation. And it really helps us to give that back to people if we just simply sometimes pause and ask the right question. The answers begin to emerge. And that's a lot of weight to be able to sit down, to go from expert to just facilitator.
that's powerful. Thank you. Thank you. I'm thinking about that new leader or that experienced leader asking themselves, well, Shanika, how do I self-coach then? Like, how do I self-coach to enhance, increase this human connection that you're talking about?
And it really involves, I think I talked a little bit about just creating time to be reflective and
Okay.
building that
Mm-hmm.
into your practice. And there are some question stems that I offer in the workbook that just help people to just get into a regular flow. And certainly it's not a be all end all list, but it really is, just for example, when you sit with yourself and you give yourself, I really believe that meditation or centering and grounding is helpful for folks. Whether you take 60 seconds of just deep breathing or listening to sounds of nature, whatever your thing is to help you detach a little bit from everything that has happened prior to your time of reflection and to get into a space with yourself. That's
Mhm.
how I would, recommend beginning. And then just really asking yourself, listening to your body. If you're feeling anxious in any way, what's causing this anxiety right now? Where's that coming from?
Mhm.
If you're feeling pressured, where's the pressure coming from right now?
Mhm.
And knowing your body enough to be able to ask yourself, where do I feel energy flowing right now? Is the
Mhm.
energy in my head? Is it in my core? And asking yourself, when I feel that energy in my head, what does that mean for me? Maybe I'm thinking too much. Maybe I'm overthinking something. Maybe I'm worried about something that's coming up. Usually, for me, when I feel more energy in my core area, that means a little bit of nervousness about something or a little bit of apprehension and fear. And then I begin to ask myself, what's coming up that's making me, feel this way? And when I'm really honest with myself, something emerges and it gives me an opportunity. Okay, you have a meeting today at 5 o'clock with this group. And okay, I'm feeling a little unsure about that. Why am I feeling unsure about that? Because the last time it didn't go so well. What didn't go so well about it? What are your goals for that meeting today? And it gives me an opportunity to really like think ahead, to think about how I want to show up. And for me, what I've learned about myself is that I'm sometimes offset by other people's energy. So if I've had an experience with you previously and the energy didn't feel right, it can be offsetting. And so when I know that I'm getting ready to interact with that energy again, I might need to do a little bit of self preparation work so that I can make sure that I'm showing up with the right kind of energy that's going to lead us into a conversation that would be useful. And I just think that when you carve out this time to be reflective, it just creates a level of awareness around what it is you really need to work through. And
Mhm.
when that becomes a practice or a habit, we start to see patterns or trends that keep showing up for us over and over again. And it gives us the opportunity then to really implement self coaching and to start with, just inquiry, asking ourselves questions, pushing ourselves a little bit. you know, a lot of times we don't even want to be honest with ourselves.
Right.
know
Oh, well.
something is feeling uncomfortable. But when you get into that inquiry phase, and you really start to ask yourself questions about what it is that you've decided is a goal or priority, naturally you start responding to your own questions. And I used to think that talking to yourself was not such a good thing. But I've learned over the years that having a conversation with yourself is a powerful tool that helps you to unlock some of the wisdom that you naturally have that oftentimes can't emerge because we never get past the level of being in our feelings.
Oh, okay. Great. That's excellent. And I know for confidentiality reasons, you can't, really share any one experience of people that you have coached. But I wonder about maybe even from your own past experiences, right? As a leader, when you had a team that was, you're a leader now, but when you had a team that you were leading in a fast-paced environment, many mandates around you, whether there was a time when you successfully implemented self-coaching, and if you could share that experience and what might have been the outcome of that experience for you, right? Like you can tell your own business, but not anybody else's.
That's on my own business. For sure. I'll go back a few years ago, 2020, actually, after the horrible death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. Um, Watching that, we were still learning virtually and knowing that I needed to have a conversation with the team
Mm.
and getting myself prepared to have this conversation and to create space for the team of a diverse group of staff members to come together. I sat with myself and really asked, because I was in my feelings, a lot of strong emotions around what I had witnessed and watched repeatedly and grappled with. I was angry.
Mm.
I was in a place where, I was demanding justice. And the more I sat with myself, one of the first questions that after I began to work through my emotions, how are you feeling right now? And all of those things is, what do I want the outcome of this conversation or this meeting to be? And I'm thinking about, all the folks that I have in front of me. There are going to be people that join this call that have a different perspective. There are going to be people that join this call that I may be looking at sideways because maybe they're not having the reaction that I think they should be having, in this conversation. And I really had to work through all of that to decide what I really wanted to do was to create space for my team to have an authentic conversation about what had happened, but in a way that would be productive to us moving forward as a team. I did recognize that sometimes you have to take a step back, or sometimes you have to dip your feet in the messiness in order to make progress. And I asked myself, well, if this gets messy, or if it gets out of hand, or if it starts going left, then what will I do? And thinking about my people, I said, if it goes too far, I'll have to stop it. But I came up with like a couple of just sentence starters that I wanted to jump in with. And I was really careful about, what I would say, as not, my desire was not to offend anyone, but it was to tell the truth, and it was to be honest, and it was to create this space. And when I had worked through all of this
Mhm.
and all of my emotions, and then one of the questions was, how am I going to take care of myself? How am I going to take care of me after this conversation? Of course, I'm thinking right now about how am I going to take care of the team that is taking care of the children. But then, you always have to ask yourself, how am I going to take care of myself? And I had written myself a guide to how I wanted it to start, how I wanted to open, the question, or the just the starter phrase that I wanted to use, how I wanted to open up the floor, the what if this happens, the what if that happens. And I felt confident enough when I finished that conversation with myself, or that self coaching, to go ahead and to send out that email inviting staff. And it wasn't a mandatory thing, but it was that I'm opening up space. This horrific thing has happened, and it is going to impact how we move on from this point as a team. I'm inviting you all into this space. And just about all of the staff members showed up, and the conversation did go left. It went
Okay.
very left. However, I believe because I was transparent and that I had a strong enough relationship with folks after that first call that I did have to pause and I did have to end. I recognized that I needed to reach out to people individually. And in doing so, it took me a long time, but hearing people's feelings, their belief in their stories, a week or so later, I was able to open up a space again. And that space became a healing space for people.
Uh,
And it
mm,
became a bridge for us to walk over, to move forward, and to love on our children and to extend love to our family and our community. And I think I use that example because at a point, I didn't necessarily have the courage to open up this space to have this conversation. Initially, I think I was waiting for, let's see if the organization is going to send out some talking points. And
mm,
after 10 minutes of waiting, I'm like, girl, what are you doing? This conversation needs to happen now, not next week. So I begin to just work through it and coach myself to get through, the conversation. And oftentimes we have to do that, especially as a Black woman, working with other leaders. There are things that you just need to put out there and you
mm,
need to say, you need to have the courageous conversation, ask the bold question, say the thing, and then work through it. And when you don't say the thing, especially if you are in a role of leadership, you not only hold yourself back, you're holding the whole organization back. And that
mm.
organization has an impact on a lot of other things. And so when I'm working with leaders now, people come into sessions frustrated, upset, ready to turn things out. But when they leave the session, they have a plan, a self created plan about what they can do. And oftentimes, it's just a mindset shift. It's how we're looking at things that can be a game changer, for us.
Yeah.
I would offer, if you have the ability to get coaching. But coaching, it's short term. Sometimes we work with people, it's a 6 month engagement, 3 month, a year engagement. But at some point, you're going to be without your coach.
Right.
And you have to learn the art of slowing time for yourself, being reflective, developing awareness, using inquiry to really get to the root of what's happening to create your own plan to move forward. And when we do that, it helps us to better communicate with other people and to elevate humanity.
Oh, I love it. I love it. That is the perfect segue. That was perfect. We could drop the mic on that one. But that was powerful. I heard you say, first of all, that in that process, it was a matter of self-care and also a means to serving your team, and deep concern for their well-being. I also understand you to be saying, hey, there are some circumstances where please expect it to be messy. And therefore, and in those situations, we definitely have to slow down and prepare, right? Like not just say, oh, I'm going to have this meeting because I'm the leader and bring people together and see how they feel. Um, you have to be thoughtful about it. And even when that happens, you're not exactly responsible for the outcome because people are people, right? But you were thoughtful that there are people who are not going to feel the same way I do. There are going to be people who are concerned about even their response because they don't think the same way I do. And I still have to show up for those people because I do still deeply care about those people. It That's powerful. I'm not sure. Oftentimes in education, I hear people talk about the students, we're often talking to team members about what we can do for students or sometimes their families and not for ourselves. And I have a deep concern about that because I believe if we don't focus on our well-being, how can we give to other people and really support truly support their well-being? Like you can't give something you don't have. Yes. And while it's not our intention to do that, going back to what you said a little earlier, we have a lot of transactional um, exchanges with people that don't build on relationship, don't build trust, which it sounds like you had within your staff generally. And when you created a space to air feelings and your own, we saw the messiness of it. You decided to have individual conversations
Yeah.
to ensure that you could hear other people and be heard. And then you set up the environment for healing. I see 3 steps, not the one and done meeting that we think that we're going to have and that's going to fix everything. Right? And that it was worth it. Sure, who has time for that, right? Who has time? We don't ever have time. But if we don't have time for people, then what are we doing here? That's what I keep thinking. Like, what are we doing on this earth if we don't have time for people?
Absolutely. So true. And you asked earlier around thriving. And I was just thinking about existing and thriving. And the space in between those two things is a little bit of messiness.
Mm,
You can avoid the messiness and just exist and just keep going along with the status quo. Or you can step outside of your comfort zone, be a little bit uncomfortable, create a little bit of messiness, knowing that this is what you have to go through to get to the place where you will thrive as a leader, or you can get your organization to thrive. So that's just it. Self
mm,
coaching helps you to step outside of that comfort zone, be uncomfortable a little bit so that you can
yes,
get to that higher level of self.
that's awesome. Well, I want to thank you so much, Chuanika. That was powerful. Are there any resources, they might be books, courses, organizations that you would recommend for people's further learning about self-coaching or self-coaching specifically to increase their human connection?
Sure, I definitely recommend my workbook on self coaching, tapping into your inner wisdom, a guide on self coaching. But I also recommend Elena Aguilera has a book on coaching for equity, which is
Yes.
excellent. She also has her later book on transformational coaching, all good resources for people who are interested in just learning more about coaching and how those conversations can be used as a tool to have better communication with people.
Yes, thank you so much. Now, how can people get in touch with you after this episode?
And my website is info at imagine and inspire leadership.com. And I am working on all of my social media handles. So that'll be coming soon.
But the website is the place. So is it Imagine and Inspire
Leadership.com.
leadership.com? And then there's a place like to contact you
Yes.
from that website.
Yep.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, I want to thank you again and again and again. This has been powerful. I feel like we just had a soul care conversation.
Thank you so much for this space.
Yes, and I look forward to many more conversations as we grow together. And just thank you for being so generous with your time, with your expertise, just loving people enough to get on here and share your thought leadership. So I want to thank you and everyone who stopped by. Please leave a comment, subscribe, and share this episode. And thank you all again and again and again for listening to Rooted to Thrive.